Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Laura. I'm part of a marketing team in MLC Presentation Design Consulting, and I'm glad to be here with you today because we have the pleasure of hosting two highly esteemed authors, Maurizio Cava, author of Lean Presentation Design and the recently published Presenting Data, and Carmen Simon, author of Impossible to Ignore and her latest book, Made You Look. And this is what inspired us to organize this talk today. In fact, in this session, Maurizio and Carmen will discuss the topic of neuroscience applied to communication and, of course, artificial intelligence. A fascinating debate, I would say, that combines the scientific approaches with advanced communication practices. Here you will have the opportunity to hear their perspectives, but most importantly, to engage with them in an open dialogue. Additionally, for those who will stay with us until the very end, as always in our webinars, we have prepared some exclusive resources, and you will find the QR code at the end of this session and receive all the materials in your inbox. So I encourage you to participate actively and make the most out of this unique opportunity. Now I'll hand over to Maurizio to get started. Hello, Maurizio. Can you hear me?
Hello, ciao Laura. Hello, everybody. How are you guys? So I can see we already have many people connected. Hi, Laura. Thank you for the introduction. This is an interactive session, as Laura was telling us. The idea is we're going to have a conversation with the amazing Carmen, and I've read all her books. We had a talk in the past. She is top-notch of neuroscience applied to presentation. She also studies interaction between human and artificial intelligence. I even recently participated personally to one of her experiments. It's an honor to have her our webinar here today. So let me welcome Carmen, and we start straight away because we have plenty of things to talk about with her, and I can't wait to begin.
Hello, it's nice to see you, and welcome everyone.
Hello, Carmen. welcome to join. Where are you?
So today I am reporting from Los Angeles. Typically I live a little further up north, but I am here, and Southern California is always very welcoming. And we hope that we can create a similar sunny and welcoming atmosphere for all of you as you're joining us.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you on board again. And okay, let's cut to the chase. Let's start right away. Okay, so I already have something in mind because I recently finished to read the latest book that you can clearly find in the picture below. It's Made You Look. Guys, this is an amazing book. It's beautiful in content, it's brilliant in the insights, it's beautiful in the way it is designed. Carmen, it's a masterpiece. So the first curiosity is, let's start from you, I would say, because, you know, there might be people who meet you for the first time here in our community. So my very first question for you would be, we know you are a well-known, recognized neuroscientist. You dedicate a lot of your work to studying how people interact with presentations, how people interact now with artificial intelligence. We're very curious to know the latest insights from your research. My very first question is, what fascinated you at the very beginning to start working in these fields, and what really moved you to translate your experiments into business concrete insights for people, for corporate people, for business presentations? So what is the main driver? And of course, feel free to tell us more about you and your work.
Thank you so much. And as we look back on momentous moments in our lives and careers, it is good to ponder, what is it really that pushes you in a certain direction? And I remember working at the time for a telecom company here in the US. And every week we would be receiving vendors who would be pitching to us on their software tools. And you would have Monday vendor day, and you would have Wednesday perhaps vendor day again. And by Friday, we would reserve a few more spots for those who couldn't make it on Monday or Wednesday. And then the following week, we had to meet and deliberate which vendors captured our attention and we felt a stronger connection with, and that we could partner with them in some way. And we were recognizing that after just a few hours, we had no idea who said what. After a few days, most of that information was gone. And the week later, looking back, unless we had taken some copious notes, which at some point we weren't really that disciplined as to where to go or what to do. So that's a moment that I still remember when I thought, if we forget so much, how do we really make decisions? And as I was finishing some other studies that I was involved in at the time, I started dedicating my career to memory in specific, because I started recognizing that every single thing that you do, personally or professionally, is based on memory. Memory fuels all decision making. So as you're listening to us, I would love for all of you to type in the chat box, by the way, what kind of content do you produce, or what is your own motivation for listening to us? But as I suspect that as you're creating any type of content, know this: if you want people to move in your direction, and I love the way that you use the word move, what moved you? We have a brain so we can move, by the way. As you're considering anyone moving your direction, you must make memory your mission. Otherwise, it'll be very, very difficult to be after behavior change, which I imagine is one of the major goals for any business professional.
You must make memory your mission. This is an amazing quote. But also, I love the way you talk about moving people, because at the end of the day, I believe that presentations are all about that. The reason I was giving a workshop recently, and I was telling my class, guys, at the end of the day, the reason why we are here, we are doing a presentation, it's because we need a moment of sharing in which we can have a conversation. And the presentation for us is the story behind, is the narrative that has been created for you as an audience. But at the end of the day, the interaction is what is going to make us progress. I believe a conversation, a presentation is a trigger, is a moment, a conversation between people, and this is what really moves us. Otherwise, I told guys, just send them an email or record a webinar or just send them something that is asynchronous, because what's the point of being here and spending time? Plus, what's the point of spending all these hours making presentations if at the end of the day, nobody is going to listen and therefore being moved? Memory is a very interesting part of that. And I have some key questions in my outline here about memory, because one key insight that I learned from you is the fact that we need to think that sometimes we don't talk to decision makers straight away, but it might be that we talk to people who will talk to people who will talk to people who will take the decision. This might happen, for example, in sales, especially when we work B2B, business to business, and we therefore have maybe a multi-layered organizational structure. So if we are not able to print the message in people's memory, then there is no way the decision will happen farther down in the hierarchical chain, right? So this is very interesting. And another interesting point, I think, about what you were saying is the fact that everything started from a personal need. So you actually felt yourself in that situation, and you wanted to know more, to learn more about something that happened to you, which is very close to what happened to me. I come from the corporate world as well. And I felt that people were moved by presentations, and sometimes they were not. But anyway, in any situation in a corporate environment, very important decisions are taken on presentation, are made thanks to presentations. So this is what triggered me to think, right, so these presentations might be very important somehow. And here I want to connect this with my next question for you, which comes from a sentence that you wrote in your book that I loved, which is you wrote, producing multiple versions of content can be expensive, but producing content that is ignored costs a fortune. I see you laughing already, but I think this is like a mantra. So
yes, you've said a few important things, and let's connect this to some brain science principles. It is true that quite often you have to have a message that may not necessarily be delivered for the initial decision maker, but it has to be retellable, because that person is going to say it to someone else, and that person is going to say it to someone else. So in the sessions that I share that are based on neuroscience, I often prompt people to know this. After 48 hours, the business brains forgets about 90% of the content that it was exposed to. Remember vendor day at my telecom company. And I'm not too concerned about the steep amount of forgetting, because for now we have human brains. We haven't merged with those AI tools that you're mentioning just yet. And human memory is fallible, so we forget. I am concerned about with that 10%, let's call it a metaphorical 10% that people tend to stick with for a while. I'm saying metaphorical because sometimes you may be slightly larger, slightly smaller, quite often a lot smaller, but let's be optimistic, 10%. I'm concerned about that one because unless you're very deliberate about that one and you don't leave it to chance, then you might not necessarily, if you're deliberate about it, you will have some positive consequences. I see that some of you are building sales presentations in here. You're perhaps working in research and you want to convince people to believe in your ideas and remember your ideas. The only way that can happen is if people remember what you want them to remember. So do not leave that message to chance. But as you're crafting then your 10% message, the way we call it, make sure it has this retellability factor that you're pointing at, because some people will have to say it on your behalf. So for example, we were just working with a company, and I asked them about the 10% message, and it was related to this notion of the intelligent communications fabric. And if you think about that phrase, it kind of sounds sort of good if you know what it means in their space. It was also telecom space, by the way. But initially, you just really have to think about it. So unless you work in that space, that phrase may not necessarily have this retellability factor. I get a lot of inspiration on how retellable a message is from iconic movie lines. I'm curious, as all of you are listening to this, if you want to use the chat box, I'd love to know what movie lines are still in your mind. But if you think about Houston, we have a problem. Or if you think about show me the money, or Maurizio, I don't know, do you have any kind of like favorite movie lines that you say, or you may need a bigger boat? Remember that one, the classic?
Yeah, well,
Those
I love when in Pirates of the Caribbean, Jack Sparrow says a ship is all about freedom.
it's all about freedom, or I'll be back, as you're saying here in the chat box. Yes, that freedom word is a very strong one, isn't it? So as you're pondering what really makes a message retellable, and if you want to get some inspiration from these iconic movie lines, one of the criteria, they have a few criteria, which is why all of us repeat them decades after those movies were released, and we put them in various sentences of our own. One of the criteria is portability. So you can say, I'll be back, whether you work in finance, whether you work in sales presentations, whether you work in biotech, whether you work for a university, that line applies. Even the phrase, you'll need a bigger boat. You don't even have to be in the Navy to be able to say that. You will be able to adjust that phrase to any of those contexts. And of course, what other criteria those phrases have are related to cognitive ease. Those words come to mind easily. So as you're reflecting on your own content and you're crafting your 10% messages as a practical guidelines, guideline wonder this: to have a good message, and a memorable message, it must be retellable. To be retellable, it has to have cognitive ease. It has to come to mind easily. Because notice, even when I said, what's an iconic movie line? And you said, I'll be back, or it's all about freedom. You don't have to think so much. Those words just kind of roll off the tongue and come to the mind easily. Do your messages do that?
This is a very interesting concept, and you write about it in the book at a certain point. It's very interesting. I was thinking, so how then does the presentation help us to make this happen? Any practical tip that we can make an example of, or is it just something that you use in your speech?
Let's ponder this for a moment. So far we're claiming this. People forget most of your content. Don't worry so much about that. Worry about something that is very critical for you to remember, and for them to remember. First of all, you have to remember your own messages, by the way. And that's where you can be your own first test. So see, as you're clarifying your own 10% messages, you're saying it today. And then tomorrow, as you wake up, is that message coming to your own mind easily? Because your audiences ultimately are not going to be that different from the way that you behave and you act. How do those messages resonate with your own brain, first of all? Do you have any type of chemistry with them? And as you tell them to other people and to your friends and family, with your spouse, by the way, be able to understand that message easily. My husband is a pilot, so he works in a different field than I am, but quite often I'll run some things by him and say, if somebody just stopped you and said this message to you, would this make any sense? So do a little bit of your own qualitative testing, because that can tell you a lot. You can get some inspiration from these iconic movie lines. Since we're talking about the practical tip, why not? Look for words that are familiar to the brain. People don't have to question, what does this mean? And they're also fairly malleable. I really enjoy words that have multiple connotations. Like, for instance, we were working for the presentation of a construction company. And we are recognizing that as they wanted to pitch their services, there's so much competition in construction, by the way. There is not only just one construction company, you have a million of them. So they don't have it easy. So they were pitching this building owner that wanted to create not one, but multiple buildings. And a few of them would have retail and a gym and a swimming pool, and of course, apartments and parking. So this is a very complex structure. Because it's complex and because it's not just one building, it's multiple. That means that as you construct the first building and people are moving in and you keep on constructing, what's most important to this building owner is that the people who took the first leap and are now living in that first building are not waking up each morning to the very juicy sound of jackhammers that are just right next to your bedroom door. So when we are asking, what do you think is the most important message for these people to hear? They're mentioning the importance of a guest experience. They're calling their apartment owners guests. So guest experiences were very important. So we build that into the main message. So guest experience already to a building owner comes to the mind easily, cognitive ease. And then we are building the message around this notion of a layered experience, because the guest will have layered experiences in the sense that you can be sleeping, you can be shopping, you can be swimming, but also the construction as it happens is layered, because you're building another building and another one and another one. There's so many layers to this thing. So the word layered guest experience was a heavy one. So as a practical guideline, can you look for words that have multiple connotations and they can be portable so they can make sense in this context, but also in this other context?
It looks to me like a Socratic way of extracting the truth from the presenter, because one thing that caught my attention while you were giving this example, just before you said sometimes we need to be 100% sure about what is the key message, the core message we want to communicate, because people only retain 10% of everything we say. So being optimistic, you actually added. So this means that we need to be 100% confident, and we need to be 100% sure about what that 10% is, because is it possible that sometimes presenters are not clear about the 10% that they want to share? Is it something that might happen? I'm just it's a provocative question, of course, but it made
It
me
is,
laugh.
and
So I wanted
I
to.
see it all the time. I see it all the time. A lot of people aspire at being memorable, but very few really know what they want to be memorable for.
Okay. This is very interesting because in lean presentation design, what we always tell people is that before opening any PowerPoint, before even imagining giving a talk, we always say, guys, you need to understand the first who you're going to talk to, second, why you're going to do that. So what do you want them to do that they wouldn't have done without your presentation? And then third, we always talk about objections. Why shouldn't they do what you want them to do at the end of the presentation? And these will be a good analysis of the objections, will fuel the contents that we need to run the audience through in the presentation, because this means, I mean, if people will be taken through their objections, okay, then they might be then able to act. So I think we're very close in this, and extracting this 10% is crucial, so that you know at least what needs to pass, what must go through as a message. Now, my question is, do you think that, because, okay, let's say we now know what is our 10%, what is our key message, we know what we want to be memorable for, but then here the challenge comes, and we need to make sure that people retain that 10%, because maybe the first question that comes to my mind is, in the audience, right? Will the 10% of one be the same 10% of someone else? So maybe each person will retain a different 10%. So this is my first question. This maybe depends on the speaker. Also, would maybe storytelling meant as a narrative way of storylining our contents be a good way to make our contents memorable, maybe to communicate this 10%? So what do you think?
Yeah, so for the first point that you made, this is what I meant earlier when I was saying that you must be deliberate about your 10% message, because that's how you're guarding against everyone, not individual people taking away individual messages. Your vision must be everyone walks away with the exact same 10% message. And the reason you want that, by the way, is because I wonder what the situation is like in Europe, but for us here in the US, as you're trying to move people, since we started with that phrase, it's not just one person that you want to move, it's usually groups. It's not just one person that you want to influence their decision. It's usually 5, 6, 7 people. The buying group here in the US is getting larger. I've heard buying groups being as large as 8, 10, 11, even 18 people need to say yes to that construction company, by the way, and not just one person. So that's why, as you clarify it, as you're looking for that message to have some cognitive ease and for that message to be portable and layered if you can, another criteria to add on to the practical guidelines is repetition. There is no secret. Repetition is the mother of memory. So the more this group of people hears the exact same thing said the exact same way again and again and again, that phrase wasn't just "I'll be back" and then it was paraphrased like "I'll return." It was "I'll be back" every single time that it was said again and again and again. Your phrase, "It's all about freedom," it wasn't all about freedom one time and it was about liberty the next time. Once you have your 10% message, you stick with it, and repetition must become your friend. I say it must become your friend because I'm noticing that as adults, people are afraid of repetition almost as children are afraid of darkness. We feel like if we said one message that one time and it was strong enough, at least in our minds, then surely people will pay attention and they will retain it forever. But that is not so. We need a lot of exposure and reinforcement of that same message in order for you to be deliberate about your 10% message and not leave it to chance.
Repetition, I think, is a key point in presentations. We have a very limited working memory, which is like a barrier to our long-term memory and filters out or loses most of the things that we try to input. Repeating the message is, I think, a very powerful strategy. However, I agree with you that scares most of the speakers, because speakers don't want to be repetitive somehow, or they are afraid that they're going to become boring. And actually, you make a very strong point about boredom in your book, and there is another sentence that I want to take out of your book in which you talk about boredom, and you say that studying at a business content, as a business presentation, it's as fancy as studying at the beige wall, if I remember well. So you make a very clear point about boredom. This probably is also something that doesn't help us very much. Therefore, in this context, I wouldn't be surprised for people to be scared of repetition. But I will admit, to be honest, that sometimes it happened to me as well. We are presenters, right, as everyone else, and most of what I share with my audience very often comes from my own experience, from my own mistakes that I do and keep doing all the time. And it happens, especially when I give workshops, give trainings, and maybe I get multiple repetitions in large corporates because maybe we're doing a cascading project. And sometimes, I keep updating my contents all the time, and I feel the pressure. But sometimes it happened to me recently. I got people coming back to the same training for the second and sometimes even the third time. And I went like, guys, you kind of know all my jokes, you know the contents. Yeah, there are some updates, but overall you've gone through the training. So why are you coming? And these guys told me, Maurizio, the first time you get the inspiration, the second time you start grasping some real technique. Maybe the third time we're going to improve our skills even more because we are not distracted anymore by the jokes. And now we are focusing. We know where you want to go, where you are heading with your presentation. We can focus on repeating the exercises and getting your feedback. So in the interaction, very often people value interaction very much, and I think nowadays this is even another important topic. I swear to everybody, I was trying not to pronounce this word, but now at a certain point I will have to talk about artificial intelligence, guys. I've been good for about half an hour, so I think it's been already very good. But one thing I was reflecting about is if I am finding key sentences, maybe movie sentences, famous sentences coming from movies, and I want that I want to associate to my contents, for example, right? Sometimes I might not have an idea. Like I have my presentation. My presentation is all about numbers, P&Ls, a lot of data, and as we know, probably business presentations are not like as fun as watching a movie. So sometimes I think brainstorming with AI might help us to find connections. So like I could upload my presentation to a large language model. I'm not gonna say any specific names for now. Any large language model would work, but maybe AI could find us connections, or maybe famous sentences could help us in the brainstorming, or even AI could help us in the role play. So maybe you said sometimes I just ask my husband, coming from a different field, if that message is understandable, if it's easy to understand. Maybe even AI could be a sparring partner, or not. What do you think about it?
It's definitely possible. I've done 5 neuroscience studies by now on the human brain and the AI brain. Let's call it that, and the similarities and differences between the two. And it is possible to use AI as a coach. You can use it as a coach for your content. You can use it as a coach for your delivery skills. And it'll be a plausible one. I'm finding fewer and fewer statistically significant differences between being coached by a human versus being coached by an AI that was trained per some solid frameworks. So the only observation that I would make around there, though, is who's coaching the AI and what framework are you using? So do a lot more research on that to make sure that the foundation is solid. And once it is, then you can say, oh, I got a lot more from that human interaction versus the AI interaction. I am noticing, since we're talking about memory, that at least for now, perhaps this will be different in the future, we do tend to remember more from human interactions and feedback in a coaching situation than AI feedback. And it's possible because, at least for now, this is linked to something that you were alluding to earlier, which is personal experiences and lived in stories. So for example, I was doing a neuroscience study where I was observing what happens in a seller's brain. You're noticing that a few of you are doing sales presentations, so you're in that space. As a seller, perhaps you're thinking, I need to keep up my skills. I need to constantly upskill. And could AI be there for me to do so? So half of the people in my study were assigned to work with an AI tool as a simulation, as a role play, interacting with a perceived customer, and then you receive feedback on your skills. And then the other half was assigned to a human who was pretending to be the customer at first for a role play, and then the human would give you feedback as to what you did. The scenario that I picked was a customer service scenario. So the seller was wearing the neuroscience gear that I use, which is an EEG cap, an ECG electrode on the chest. I use a GSR device. That's the neuroscience context. So as people are wearing these biometrics and they are assuming the role of a seller, they're now interacting with an AI for simulation. The AI is an upset customer, by the way, and so it's the human during the role play. And they're upset because they had received a broken laptop case, and the seller wants to put their mind at ease and apply some empathy skills. So that was the task that we were looking to see if it was taught correctly and observed correctly. And what I was noticing is that while there were no statistically significant differences during the simulation, in the sense of interacting with an AI customer or a human customer, during the feedback phase, people were remembering more from what the human said as feedback versus what the AI said as feedback. And why is that? I suspect it's because when the simulations were happening and then you're reflecting back on them and on the feedback associated with the simulation, when you're interacting with the AI tool, any good seller at some point would have asked the question, why did you need a laptop case to begin with? Because you have to get to the customer's why, and we're talking about motivations. And the human asked that question. When you ask the human that question, and he was pretending to be the customer at first, he would say, well, I was on my way to a wedding and I really wanted to bring my laptop. By the way, my wife and I got into like a terrible fight. And also on that trip, I caught my son watching something very shady on the internet. So needless to say, I was in a bad mood already. So by the time I opened this laptop case and it's broken, you can imagine that I just went over the edge. Whereas when you ask the AI customer that question, why did you need a laptop case to begin with? The AI said, that's not relevant to this situation. Let's just focus on the task at hand. I want a refund for this broken object. So you see how when you're staying abstract and on the surface versus when you're zooming in into something that is a lived experience and sounds more like a story, now you get to remember, obviously, a few more of those details. So in the future, if you are in the business of training AI tools to then train you, make sure that they have some of these segments that improve memory, such as vivid details and lived-in experiences, which stories are made of.
Training AIs is becoming a very, very hot topic. I believe I've seen many generalist AIs, but I've also seen many specialized AIs coming up, and those specialized AIs can perform very well at very specific tasks, of course. But I would focus on the interaction and I will try my best to stay as human as possible in this webinar, and to make it happen, and focus on the interaction part. There is a concept that I loved in the book when you talk about embodied cognition. So there is a moment in which you say, okay, guys, to be clear, our brain needs movement. If we move, then we remember better what we've been told, because we are motion animals, and therefore moving will help. And then while I was reading this concept, I found it very interesting. I said, oh, actually, this is true. I think I keep moving all the time, especially when I'm learning. I get if I'm too static, it's difficult for me. And then I asked myself, okay, but if I'm doing a presentation, right, and people are sitting in front of me, how do I make them move? Well, sometimes I remember we talked. Sometimes you can make them stand, especially if you are connecting from far away, like in a virtual setting. Maybe you can make them stand, do something, then come back. So you can trigger movements. But I also think, if I remember well, that you mentioned making them taking notes might even help, especially if they're actually handwriting the notes. And this made me very curious. So what is it about? How do we really make them to move? Can we interact with them in a way that they could move somehow, or do even some small movements that will improve their memory? And you have seen that I'm shifting from AI to humans again.
It's a good shift, and yes, I do like that trend a lot. It's one of the hottest trends in neuroscience right now, embodied cognition. And the reason that it's so important is because recognizing that the way that the brain builds perceptions and eventually memories and eventually decisions is not just through some mental abstract representations of the world. Yeah, sure, we take in the world and we build some abstract around it, such as a word like freedom, for instance, which is an abstract word. But the main way in which we build our perceptions and memories is at the intersection of brain, body, and environment interacting together. And once you have that realization, and the body is involved just as much as the brain is with the environment, that's when you start asking some questions that will become very practical for your jobs, which is, how do I get other people's brains and bodies to move? I was suggesting note taking because it's one of the easiest way in which you can invite an audience, even if it's not in the same location with you. Maybe a few of you that are listening right now are ideally taking notes, and not just any type of notes, but handwritten notes. And the reason for that is because the moment that you grab the pen and you put it on the paper, your fingers are involved, your whole hand is involved, your entire arm is in the motion, your neck, your full body is into this activity as you're leaning into the notes. And also on the cognition side, when you're taking notes, you start synthesizing a few of the ideas, you start processing a little bit more deeply, versus when you're taking typed notes, what we would observe is that you tend to type more verbatim of what somebody else said. So therefore, there isn't that deep processing that could happen. So inviting people to take notes, even by saying something as benign as, if you write this down, this will serve you well in what you do next, connected to your 10% message, then that's one way. And of course, from then on, your imagination is only the limit, because if you are in training situations, obviously you'll have a lot more opportunities, because people can be invited to get up, they can be invited to interact with objects in their environment, they can be invited to bring those in and speak about them. But the more of the brain and body that is involved, the stronger the perception and therefore the memory for that moment.
This is a very interesting point. Do I remember well that maybe you told me the story that one time you made somebody, like on the other side of the screen, stand up and take pictures of something something that made them happy, if I remember well. And so somebody came with a picture of a child, somebody with a picture of the dog or the cat, somebody the picture of the loved one, and then you shared all this picture in the chat, and everything became very interactive, very interesting. Was that the discussion that we had, or it's just something that I remember?
It was. I think I may have described it in the book as well. I teach at Stanford once a quarter. So you see, when you're in training situations, you do have a lot more capabilities for that type of interaction and movement. So since we're talking about AI versus humans, an activity that I have in one of my sessions is grab your phone. I know that all of you want to anyway, and capture a picture from your environment of the essence of being human. And that you have to think about for a while, because there are some things that come to the mind easily, like what's the essence of being human, perhaps another human, such as a child, or a family member. But then what else constitutes our human fabric. Then we go towards the furry friends that we have around us, and then we go to taking care of other life forms such as your plants, and of course eating is what sustains our humanity. So you may get some pictures of fun dishes, and a messy environment, of course, contributes to our humanity as well, or takes away from it, depending on how you want to look at it. So all of this to say is that through that motion of getting up, turning towards something, grabbing the phone, yet again, now you're touching things, you're interacting with things, you're reflecting on things. There's just so much of brain, body, and environment coming together. That's the question and the challenge that perhaps you want to take on and write down for yourself, to see how you can enable that for your own content.
It's very fascinating, the fact that we really have endless possibilities when we give presentations, and sometimes we feel like we should just stick to the deck, deliver the presentation the way it is, and sometimes we don't dare to go off script, or the presentation has been laid out that way, so I must go that way, I must follow the script. Sometimes just making people stand up and doing something crazy, or not even, just something human, as we said, makes a difference and trigger an experience, creates an experience that maybe people will remember forever. They will always think, oh, that is the training where I've done this and that, and this might even help print the message into their long-term memory. There is another curious statistic that comes from your book. We're talking about virtual settings, right? And there is a comparison that I picked up from, I learned from your researches, which is, you said that in a virtual setting, so I would love to ask the question to people who are listening. So guys, do you think that, what is the percentage, right? How much attention do people pay to you when you present online versus when you present offline, like face-to-face? Because there is a difference. Do you think that they pay more attention to you when you are online? Or do you think they pay more attention to you when you are offline? What about you when you look at the presentation online? Guys, if you want to write in the chat some cues, we're very happy to receive. So in the meantime, I was saying, do you guys think that people pay more attention to us or to the slides when we are online, or maybe to us or to the slides when we are face to face? This is something that always fascinates me. I always wonder, when we are in a virtual setting, you have this little tiny square with the speaker and you can barely see it. And then you have this big, massive square with the slides. We all know that you can do streamings and you can do more advanced ways of sharing. I often do that at events, using even advanced technologies for streaming. But this is too technical for today's meeting. There is a stat that caught my attention. I said, oh my God, this is so interesting. So apparently, when we are in virtual setting, okay, so 10% of the attention goes to the presenter, the small square, and even up to 60% to the slide. So it's like 10 to 60. And when we are in face-to-face meetings, it's like 30-30, more or less, roughly. There are ranges from 11 to 21 to the slides, and from 17 to 30 to the speaker. But I would say best case scenario, it seems to be 30-30. But in both cases, what really is shocking, in my opinion, is that in both cases, no matter how the attention is distributed or split, we are missing 30 to 40% attention. So this means that 30 to 40% contents are lost, no matter whether you are in a virtual setting or face-to-face. Am I right with my math?
Yes, it's been intriguing to me, because as I conduct the neuroscience experiments, and I use the EEG devices, the ECG, that GSR thing around your wrists and fingers, there's also an eye tracker, and that's how I can tell where the attention goes and what's happening. I love the picture in the chat box of us doing the neuroscience experiment together. So now you can see the cap. What you're not seeing in this picture is there was an eye tracker in that experiment, so I could see what you see. And The challenge that we all have, another thing that maybe you want to write down as a challenge, is this. You mentioned the beige wall earlier. Where is the beige wall coming from? When I conduct these neuroscience experiments, before I show the brain and body any type of stimulus, like a sales presentation, for instance, or an AI tool, I have people stare either at a physical beige wall or at a beige screen. Maurizio, you may remember from your experiment, you had to look at a beige screen for 30 seconds. And the reason for that is because I need to know what the brain is like in an unstimulated state. So I take that baseline, and then by the time I show you that sales presentation or the AI tool, that should be extra stimulation. And then I look at the differences between those two states. And unfortunately, what happens with some business content, we see no statistically significant differences between the beige wall, so to speak, and that business presentation. So as a challenge, we all want to take on this notion of beating the beige wall. Whether you're virtual or face-to-face, as we're noticing where attention starts slipping, that means they're not doing a good enough of a job to beat that beige wall. If we connect this to the earlier notion of the importance of movement, one of the reasons why sometimes you can still maintain attention even in a virtual space is by using movement in your content. So not displaying everything all at once, but having some gradual motion that will definitely guarantee extra attention. And I know sometimes we have a strained relationship with animations because I think some software tools like PowerPoint have given us so many options where people have gone overboard and you have things bouncing around and some other effects that are very tacky. But as long as you use a very benign appear, disappear, fade in, fade out, that's all you need, because from an evolutionary standpoint, we are mandated to pay attention to that which moves. So if you can't get the brain and body physically to move, at least get some perception of movement, and that can still help with attention and therefore memory.
And I want to launch a warning here, because it takes a second, the moment we say, okay, guys, animations are good, that these presentations become like all about animations. And this is something that shouldn't happen. So I want to add one thing that I love using is quick transitions. So one thing that to give you a number that might seem crazy, but worked very well. Recently, I gave a speech on a big stage. It should have been 5 minutes, but when I got on stage, they told me it was 4 minutes 30. So always remember, prepare for something less. Nobody will be mad at you because you spoke a little less, but if you speak 1 second longer, then everybody will get crazy. So it's always better to prepare for something shorter than the time allowed. Thanks God that day I was prepared for something shorter, because they shortened my time when I jumped on stage. So it was 4 minutes 30 seconds. And my deck, I had 74 slides. So when I came on stage, I remember the production guys, they went like, Maurizio, your deck is 3 times as big as the average deck we have received today. Are you sure you're clear about timing? Because, you know, we have a stage and we have every speaker scheduled. So we can't really like exceed that time. And I said, okay, guys, no worries. I'm used to that. It's fine. When I prepare for a presentation, I time myself. And even the day before, I do some experiments with timing, okay, so that I have the vocabulary ready, especially if I'm giving a speech in a different language, which is not my native language. That helps very much. But even in my own language, it helps me to be straight to the point. So I think adding slides, sometimes in business, we see these slides on which the speaker gets stopped for stops for 20 minutes. And if we stay 20 minutes on the same slide, guys, it doesn't work, okay? It means there is too much of that slide. So having quick transitions and having slides that go fast, I think keep the attention, help me to take people through the journey and mostly catch the attention and keep the attention high all the time. Now, talking about animations, I want to stress a concept that is a discussed concept in your book, which is the mantra less is more. I know we could talk days about less is more, but there is a sentence, a quote from someone very close to you, Carmen, that I couldn't resist. I needed to read this sentence. And the quote is, a presentation is like a skirt, short enough to be interesting and long enough to cover the subject. I think this is memorable.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you enjoy that. Yes, we look to see, and we never judge against something long versus something short. We judge against what is something that removes predictability every so often. What you accomplished with that 74 slide deck in 4.5 minutes is, and we can all take it as a practical guideline, is the next moment predictable for the brain? And when things are happening very fast, which you can only do when you have that amount of information in a very short amount of time, the brain cannot predict the next moment, and it feels very much at unease, because a brain that predicts knows where to move. So that's why predictability is so important to us. That's why AI is here to stay, because it makes that promise of predictability and reducing uncertainty. So as you're thinking about long or short, think beyond the length and think in terms of, at what point am I not giving away what happens next? From the brain's perspective, the most important thing is what happens next. Of course, you can't insist on this lack of predictability for too long, because the state of tension and friction is going to become too much. So you have to reach a balance of familiarity and unpredictability. But once you have your audience's relationships and some trust, then you can afford a little bit more lack of predictability. So therefore, these fast transitions, this abundance of content, and this the only way you can get away, by the way, with a slide for 20 minutes and you're only showing one thing is if you're the most amazing storyteller on the planet. And even then, the way that you choose your phrases and the way the action is moving in your story is so unpredictable that it doesn't matter that the slide doesn't move, the story that you're sharing does.
Yeah, I think, but then I will be very provocative at this point, and I think if and this, because this is something that I tell my trainees, then if that is the case, so you are a very good storyteller, you are such a powerful speaker, and that slide doesn't even matter, because you could have whatever on that slide, because you as a person make the difference, which is the case sometimes. And you can really see, I'm talking corporate environments, of course, you see real speakers that are amazing. Well, then my point is, just don't use PowerPoint. Don't use the slides. Just come without. Save time. Except you're really putting a picture on that, and maybe you have some special effect at the end. This is what is coming to my mind. Well, while you were talking, I was thinking, okay, well, what would I put on that slide if I had to give an entire speech on one slide, right? I was thinking, how would that apply to me? And I was thinking maybe I would put a picture. Which apparently is completely disconnected from what I'm saying, so that might generate some curiosity, and people might see the picture, but there is nothing more to process. Therefore, they must follow me while I'm talking, and then maybe at the very end, I will come to the point in which I will reveal how the picture is connected to my speech. So maybe I would do something like that. This is my creativity at play. This is what I had in mind while you were talking. I imagined myself on stage doing something like that. That would be cool. Maybe sometimes I will even try it. People expect from me when I come to events having tons of slides, but then I might come with
go the opposite. See, remove the predictability. Yes,
and remove the predictability. Right. So, Carmen, I have so many questions in my outline, and I would literally keep talking forever, but I have my team already telling me, Maurizio, we're out of time, and they're right, because we need to respect also people's lot. I really love this conversation that we have, and there is so much more we could talk and explore. So I would say let's take a moment of break because we need to walk towards the conclusion, unfortunately, of this episode. So I will let Laura take over, and of course, while we're moving towards the conclusion, we are sharing the resources with our with the brave people who stayed up to the very end. Carmen is sharing a link to the chat. We also have further resources. Here there is a QR code. Thank you, Laura, for sharing. While you take the resources, so guys, very easy, take your phone, scan the QR code, get the resources. But in the meantime, if you have any questions for Carmen, for us in general, feel free to use the chat. And if not, take your resources and let us know how it went. I know sometimes we're a little, we don't want to share our questions, maybe. I mean, it's a safe environment, guys. No worries. You can do it if you like. But if you don't, then take the resources. And it's been amazing being with you. And it's been amazing hosting Carmen today. Laura, up to you.
Thank you, Maurizio. And I'd like to thank you, both of you, for this inspiring conversation. And as promised, here we are with the resources. And I hope you found this session available, and that gives you also some perspectives on this huge topic about neuroscience and communication, and a bit of artificial intelligence as well. So thank you again, guys, for joining us, and we look forward to see you at our next event.